We're trying to get our shifter to find its new home because we need to use this shifter in the car. I need to pull probably this whole center console. I'm going to wrap this with leather when it's done. But I've made a plate down in here that will mount the shifter. Like I said, we have to use this shifter with that 8-speed transmission. So it should mount down in there and molt up. I've knocked me some holes right here so I can get some rough mounting points so I can put that in. So now, believe it or not, the next tool of choice is a Sawzall? Yeah, I'm about to run a Sawzall inside my car. So, yeah, I've got an oscillator and a vibrator cutter. I've been forgetting it in my service truck for the last 2 weeks, so I'm just going to get it done with this so I can start moving forward with some other projects like, that mess right there. You know what anxiety looks like? That's, yep, right there. Well, so to, put off fixing that, I'm going to take a Sawzall and cut this up because I don't want to do that. But I don't want to cut up my car, but I'm, yep, we're going to do it. Yep, cut it. So there's my piece. Well, I had a little bit of bed liner material on there, didn't I? Not that cheap shit. That's actually the high quality stuff. Anywho's. And like typical running a Sawzall, did I cut wires? I don't think I did. The wires are safe. Yay. Alright. Now I'm going to bolt that to that. Move this down. And see if I can find our mounting points for this. Alright, well, I think that'll fit nicely right there. Kind of has the nice height once I make a little plate to meet into the boot. So the boot will sit there. I'll probably pitch this up just a tiny bit more, just so it's a little bit higher. I was thinking about doing like the faux pistol grip thing that they have for these, but to be honest, I really don't like it. If it's not an original wood pistol grip and an original car that's a stick and things that way, why put a faux pistol grip on an automatic? It is what it is anyway. So anyways, that I think is going to go right there. I just need to get some bolts, and I was looking at my hardware and I don't think I have what I want for it, but that is its home. The big old radio and backup camera and stuff is still going to go in there, so that way it's, not blocking that. It can still get to it. I'm probably going to leave and make that plate still fit there, so I'll still have the plate for the switches and all that stuff. So if I ever want to put the nitrous back or have auxiliary switches, it's a toy. Having a bunch of switches and buttons is always fun. So that will go there. And I just need to get the wires pulled through, and that will connect to that. I am probably going to just loose route a lot of things just to see if I can get the motor to fire off. I'm way away from doing that. I still have to get the fuel tank mounted, and finally got it back. So I took the Charger fuel tank that had the fuel filler on this side, took it to a friend of mine that can weld much better than I can, and he plugged up that hole, and then we put this little neck on it so that like if this was an original CUDA tank, the CUDA fill hole would be here where it goes behind the license plate, but I am trying to keep our fuel neck. So now that I have that fuel neck should come up right about here, and then I can shoot it over to that when it's done. And the under the license plate is still going to be just deleted things that direction. I'm trying to decide if I want to use our little button. What is this? I mean, gas pedal sort of thing. Accelerator. All right. Let's get that mounted and get that moved. I have the harness laid up in here, and we'll try to find some homes for some of this stuff and keep mounting and making things. While trying to route wires, playing with our new harness, and the nice part is everything's well labeled, but there's stuff like CKP, which means something, and starter solenoid, and like this harness is designed to have the starter on the passenger side, but this car with this automatic transmission has the starter on the passenger side, or on the driver's side. So this actually goes, this wire has to get looped and ran to the other side, and then I have to rerun these wires. So I have to cut our starter cable, extend the starter cable, extend that cable, and get it routed around, which kind of sucks, but that's fine. Almost better that it doesn't say thingy and thingy and thingy. There's absolutely no room with the wires going in behind the engine back over here, so we've had to take off said thingy that bolts back here. This bolts in so tight that it actually is like a paper thickness between the firewall and the engine, so that I can run the wires back behind here. This vacuum line keeps getting in my way, trying to push it up out of the way. It keeps flopping back in my face. So it's put thingy on thingy. I've unhooked and rehooked about 3 or 4 different times trying to get things routed, but they did such a beautiful job of like even putting the little clips that clip down in the holes that hold the wires on, so that the harness is clipped in really nice and tight. Everything finds its home, finds its spot. So it's just take your time, get it routed, and I don't know what VCT MNSDs, but you just go through here. Most everything seems to be labeled. I have found a few plugs that I just don't know what they go to, but everything shows, you know, like that's the thing I was just showing you right there. That just goes on the back of the firewall, or short runner valve. So that'll get plugged in. I can't find the actual plug for it though, so I will find the plug for that so I know where it goes. And just keep plugging and finding homes. Oh, more tearing it apart and more tearing it apart and more tearing it apart. I've got a lot of the wires on top kind of laid out and figured out where they need to go. I need to put it back up on the lift so I can get up underneath to figure out some of the knock sensors and other plugs up there. There's just no clearance behind the engine and the firewall, so where the wiring harnesses go through, everything's kind of touching, so that's just more of a mess. This is going to be a very long process. It really is. I've had to cut and pull more wires and more wires. I've been sticking in there and trying to pull things out. So it's going to be all sorts of fun to relume it and tie it all back together. I need to get the transmission harness stuffed in there so I can figure out where that's going to connect inside. So right now is more of just routing and looming. I've been on it for a few hours and have really nothing accomplished. Doesn't make for anything worth showing, but I figured I would just show something. Well, we've been playing for a while. We've had to go up and down on the lift a bunch to get our wiring harness tucked in behind. We're having a little bit of issues with it clearing the exhaust and hitting the exhaust in this backside. I've got the transmission wire finally ran and routed, so it's plugged into the transmission. That will go up inside on that. There's just, the thickness of this is less than the distance I have between the back of the heads and the firewall of the car, so feeding the wires around. This wiring harness was designed or wired up for a passenger side starter, so I've had to splice and take that apart and rewire and make a starter cable wire that's above here that I've got stuck in the header. I gotta lower it back down to try to get that down so that I can get it over here. We've got the gasket hole. I've got to get a grommet made up for that. I do have the knock sensor finally ran here where it's not going to hit the exhaust. I've had to heat up and beat this down to get the starter to fit in here, but I literally only have a paper's thickness between the starter and the exhaust. So I've got this heat shield I'm going to try to rig up to get around the starter so I can put that in. I did get the fuel tank mounted, so we now have the fuel tank. So it has a factory-ish looking fuel tank. The old exhaust used to come through here on this notch. I don't know if I'm going to take a piece of aluminum or weld this in and repaint, or if I'm going to do something on this valance. This is typically supposed to be removed. There's an old body seam here, and this was a removable panel from the original car. But this was all welded together when I did this car years ago. So this whole lower section is all welded to both fenders. So getting the bolts in and off of the gas tank was a little bit of a trick, but I was able to do it without having to cut this apart or make it anything worse. So that is nice and solid and connected. So I will be able to make that work. I will be putting our wiring up into the cab, not running it underneath for the fuel sending unit. And then I do have a bunch of hard fuel lines to be running all the way through. These are beautiful and gorgeous. Very happy about that. But that's a little bit of an update on where we're at there. We've had to remove seats, and I can't believe I had to take my Sawzall to the car and cut more stuff out. I had to cut some of the trunk apart to get that fuel neck and everything connected and tucked up in. We'll be adding some other materials to clean that up and fix it. So there is where we are. I'm closer for the wiring. If I can get the wiring done on the cab, I will be happy with that. Well, been playing. Been testing with our 12 volts to test our fuel pump. I have the fuel completely hooked up from sending unit underneath. I've got the necks hooked up to the fuel here. So I just tested fuel pump and it cycles and turns on. I've got all the hard lines under the car ran. I've decided to go complete opposite of having everything behind the fenders. I am actually going to have everything exposed in the engine bay. It's an engine. You have hoses and tubes and things. I'm going to have my AC lines up on top over here. I could have put the fuel filter down under the frame rail, but actually I want it easy to change. And so I ran the fuel there. This car sits so low, I want as much room around the exhaust and everything as possible. So I don't want the fuel filter close to the exhaust. I wanted everything as far away from it as it can be. So this is the fuel. We got our supply line and our return line. We have our feed line going to our fuel rail. We have our power steering pump and power steering's completely hooked up. All my belts are in. Radiator's mounted. Tranny or AC coil is mounted. The hoses aren't ran. I still have to run hoses for the AC and run my AC. I do have no fluid in it or coolant in it. I don't have my electric fans wired yet. I'm really close to seeing if the motor will turn on, to see if my electrical and everything's kind of roughly wired in. I've got a little mount made for this box, so that's kind of its permanent home. The computer's permanent home. I have a lot of wires I need to reroute and get some things in some loom and get some looming, closing some stuff up. The transmission and stuff is done inside. I still need to pull the wheel and pull some wires out there. The stick or the transmission shifter is mounted. The wiring harness is done that way. The original harness that I had to pull out and unloom is kind of wadded up over there. I'm going to have to separate everything there and get the looming back in. I did get all my sensors for the gauges, so all my gauges should work. The only thing I don't have hooked up is my RPM gauge, so that will hopefully work when it's done, but my water temperature, fuel pump and everything that way should, or fuel pressure, fuel level. So I'm really close to putting the battery in it, turning the key on, and just seeing if I have things cycle. I'll see if the starter cranks, and if it cranks and I have fuel pump, I need to run down to the gas station and throw some fuel in the fuel tank, and then I'll turn it on and see if this thing starts. It'll be exciting to see if it runs in her. All right, I'm crazy nervous, so if I can't hold the camera straight, that's because I'm shaking. I did put a kill switch in here, so it does kill the battery for like storage purposes, things that way. So let's turn that on. And now I want to, well, the dome light turns on when I open the door. That's something. Let's turn the key on. Oh, gauges did things. All right. Well, let's push the start button. See if the starter even turns over. Please don't do anything wrong. Well, we'll do that for a second more and watch oil pressure to see if it does anything. I don't know if it registers in crank mode, but well, starter sounds good. That starts good. I have the fuel pump completely disconnected. The throttle is down there because I have to mount a whole different throttle. The throttle that I used to have in the car, which was this drive-by-wire throttle, is a completely different plug harness from the other one. So, and its mount is different to the firewall. It's in a different angle. This actually is part of the other throttle. So this goes on, so it changes its angle, and I might have to fab up something. So the whole throttle thing is going to be an issue. But I think I'm going to run down the gas station, fill up a jerry can of fuel, and throw some fuel in it, and see if this thing makes noise. Took the little Swippy Charger for a run. Got some fuel. Oh, I really hope there's no major surprises here. So let's go put this in, see what we get. I know everyone is bitched in the world, but those stupid fuel cans is an absolute pain in the ass. To be safe, so you don't catch yourself on fire. Anyways, there's that. I've got a bunch of fuel residue all over the fender. Oh, she's going to need a lot cutting and buffing. Let's pull this out of the way. I think what I want to do is I'm going to turn the key on. I'm going to go back and plug the fuel pump in. Make sure that fuel pump is going to do what it needs to do. Just checking make sure nothing's like in fans and things that way if I get that crazy. And things are dropping everywhere. So we're going to turn fuel or power on. Kind of like I was going through a wiring harness manual multiple times. I was. All right. We're going to turn the key on. It's funny, the old fuel pump that was in this sounded like a jet car. It was whop, it was really loud. All right, so now I want to see if I can hear the fuel pump turn on and if it pressurizes. Fuel pump's on. Sounds like it's circulating. I don't see fuel underneath. I hear air cycling through the pump. You can hear that. There might be some cavitation on the fuel. That kind of seeped a little bit. Sounds like the air's not in it anymore. Oh, let's see what happens. Nervous. It's cranking. No sparky. Doesn't sound like we're getting what we want to our sparks. Sounds like we have fuel. Fuel is connected. Pumping obviously doesn't do anything because turn the key off for a second. Turn the key back on. Well, no exciting boom boom. I'm almost wondering if the fuel's got enough fuel in it for the pump to be catching fuel, or if it's somewhat cavitating. God, I hear air. I don't think there's enough fuel pressure, to be honest. It doesn't sound... sounds like it's leaking past. I don't know how to test for fuel pressure. That sounds, can you hear it? Sounds like it's sucking air through one of those fittings, like I don't have a good enough connection. So I'll mess with that for a second and see what we get. Well, I just had to go take a shower after getting a shower. I looked everywhere on the edge of the fuel rails to see if there's anything to test for fuel pressure, where I could check fuel pressure. Didn't have any leaks on my filter connections and fittings or anything underneath. So I tried to disconnect off this fuel rail, and when I disconnected that, noticed all the fuel everywhere and all on top, and it blew fuel all over the place. I just got soaked in fuel. So I had fuel pressure at the fuel rail, so it wasn't that, but there was a lot of air that came out of that fuel rail too. When it popped off, it definitely hissed a lot of air when it blew out at me. So maybe that was a good thing. I don't know. But anyways, I want to clean up before I catch anything on fire. So we've been playing with some wires, and one of my pink wires that set ignition or I had labeled as ignition on when I had no power on, is what I wired to ignition on. But when I put a test light on it, I did not have power when the key was on. So I now do have power when the key is on. So let's turn the battery back on. Oh, let's see what happens. So key on. Gauges come on. You can focus anytime you want to. And key. Oh! Oh, that is absolutely awesome. I did went and put a little more fuel in the tank because it just seemed like it was cavitating a little bit, so maybe there was air in it, so I played with that a little bit. Oh, I'm shaking. Smells like hot stuff. I don't see anything. You know, the headers were definitely steaming right away. RPM was super high, but it needs to learn itself and all that kind of stuff. Oh, what the hell? Let's do it one more time, huh? Oh. Key on. I will take that. Oh. More things falling down. All right. I wanted to see if, when running, if the shifter shifted or moved, but I'll worry about that on the next run. Safety glasses fell. Oh. I'm all tingly inside. Other than the pure excitement of it running, I see no problems in any of the stuff. Basically, I just didn't have 12 volts going to run position. I was tied onto some other wire. After I tied into stuff before I had power in it. So I was just trying to wire on the old harness from the old engine. I don't have any control of the transmission. The stick is like locked in the park position. I think there has to be something with a brake light button or pedal or something that's not hooked up right, or I thought they said you could bypass it with the ground, and I thought I hooked it to a ground, but I'm really excited. It's running. I'll get transmission to fine shifting, and then I can pull it out and move it, and then it's unwire everything so I can rewire everything so I can tuck in things correctly and move things around. It's really exciting that it is in this position. So it fires under its own power. Haha, good girl. I think that's where we'll end it for now. It is a beautiful day outside. Wow. Ooh, red barn. Cuda. Well, I picked it up to finish a couple things underneath. Just finished torquing the drive line. So that's real excited. So driveline is now in with the fancy little adapter up here to take from that transmission to go to a rear suspension. And I've got a couple little things underneath. I was just looking at the bottom side for the transmission coolers. Got the radiator hose in so I can put fluid in it so I can actually run it a little bit longer than a few seconds. But I have one other exciting thing, so let me lower it down and I will show you this. Just moments after I got this guy fired up and making noise, I was trying to figure out why the, I'm trying to release that and put that down. I don't know how to make that happen real quick. There you go. That's the transmission neutral lever. So this will be up under the dash. So if you ever have to tow the transmission or move it, you have to release that because the entire transmission does run by electronics, which is lots of no fun. But after I got this fired up and running, went inside and tried transmission shifter, and the shifter was just, didn't move, wouldn't light up. It was all stuck on. Read the manual multiple times, read the manual a bunch of times before I even put it in, and it would say things like, you know, for this application, it's not necessary. You can just ground the one switch and then you can, you know, get it to work. But then in another line, it was talked about programming. And I don't computer very hard. And I ended up pulling out the old wiring harness from the old motor, trying to track wires of why things weren't running. And my daughter, who lives out of state, actually is up visiting for the weekend. She showed up with significant other, and they came walking in, checking out the car. So I fired up the car for them so they could hear it. So they heard it for the first time running literally minutes after I got it running. And I showed her the schematic and the blueprints and the drawings. And he's actually an airplane mechanic and does similar things in programming. And so they started helping me chase wires. And we did have to get in the computer. We did have to, that's why this is up here. We put a stupid tablet in here and had to connect satellites. And we had to get the moon's alignment to come into play and open the door so we can have signal shoot through. I had to dig all over the shop to find this plug that came with the harness that plugs into the transmission. But long story short, now, when we turn on the key, which, I gotta turn on the battery now. It's all cool. So battery's on. I have so much wiring and cleaning to do. It is scary. But now, we turn on the key. And now the transmission shifter shifts up. You start it, apply brake, shifts into park, shifts into neutral. The new transmission shifts and everything shifts wonderfully. The computer registered everything. Everything could be seen. That is really, really awesome. But then, in modes of reading, check out what we found. There's ways to set up sport mode, track mode. So now I get to wire in some switches on the dash, and I can actually change the parameters. They already set them up. So I just flip a switch and I can go from street performance track to, what was that? Sport to track. So that is absolutely awesome. Have more buttons and switches to put in, way more wiring, more things to put. But technically right now, if I wanted to fire it up, I could put it in gear and it could back up and run under its own power and move forward and move backwards. I don't have the brakes done, but that is, technically she's alive. She's got her motor. She's got it in. Long ways from ripping down the road. And I've got to lay under that and trim wires and resolder wires and start looming and cleaning and all that. But fuel tank is in. Fuel tank's done. I'm excited.